Most men believe respect from women comes from effort, patience, and proving their intentions. They think the more they give, the more they will be valued. But if that were true, the men who sacrifice the most would be the most respected. And in reality, they are often the ones taken for granted. The truth is uncomfortable, but freeing. Respect is not created by how much you tolerate. It is created by what you refuse to tolerate. Boundaries are not walls, they are standards, and standards quietly communicate self-worth long before words ever do. When a man lacks boundaries, his kindness becomes negotiable, his time becomes flexible, his presence becomes expected rather than appreciated. Most men are never taught this. They are taught to be accommodating, understanding, and endlessly patient. But patience without self-respect does not build attraction. It dissolves it. A woman does not lose respect for a man because he sets boundaries. She loses respect when he has none. Boundaries signal clarity. They show that a man knows who he is, what he accepts, and where he stands emotionally. This clarity creates safety and attraction at the same time. Many men fear boundaries because they think boundaries push women away. In reality, boundaries filter. They remove dynamics that drain you and strengthen those that align with you. A woman who respects herself is drawn to a man who respects himself. A woman who seeks control is repelled by boundaries, and that is not a loss. This video is not about being cold, dominant, or argumentative. It is about calm authority. It is about the quiet confidence that comes from not needing approval to enforce your standards. When boundaries are set calmly and consistently, they do not create conflict. They create respect. The men who command respect do not threaten, argue, or explain themselves endlessly. They act in alignment with their values and let others adjust accordingly. Their behavior does the teaching. In this video, I will walk you through 5 boundaries that instantly shift how women perceive you, not because they are harsh, but because they are clear. These boundaries do not require confrontation. They require discipline. Once you understand these boundaries, you stop overthinking interactions. You stop negotiating your value. You stop trying to be chosen. And when that happens, respect stops being something you chase and becomes something you naturally receive. Stay with me because once you apply these boundaries correctly, women don't just respect you more, you respect yourself more, and that changes everything. Before we start, a quick reminder. The real transformation doesn't happen on YouTube. It happens inside the community. If these videos have opened your eyes, what's inside will rebuild your mindset completely. It's not just a course, it's a brotherhood, a private space where men master attraction, emotional control, and the psychology of power. You don't join for a month, you join for life. Every future course, book, and lesson is yours forever. No subscriptions, no limits, just one decision that changes your direction. If you're serious about growth, discipline, and purpose, click the link below. Join the community, enroll once, grow forever. Let's dive in. Number 1, the boundary of time and availability. One of the most powerful boundaries a man can set is how he manages his time and availability. Because time is not just a resource, it is a signal of value. When a man is always available, always responsive, and always willing to rearrange his life at a moment's notice, he unintentionally communicates that his time has low priority, even to himself. And when a man does not value his own time, others rarely do either. Most men believe availability shows interest, care, and emotional maturity, but unlimited availability does not create respect. It creates expectation. Expectation turns into entitlement, and entitlement erodes attraction quietly. A woman begins to assume access rather than appreciate it. The boundary here is not about being busy for the sake of appearing important. It is about genuinely having a life that does not pause for validation. A man with purpose, routines, and direction naturally limits his availability, not as a tactic, but as a consequence of self-respect. This limitation is felt instinctively when you do not immediately respond to every message, not out of games, but out of presence in your own life. Something shifts. Your attention becomes intentional rather than reactive, and intentional attention carries weight. Many men fear that limiting availability will be interpreted as disinterest. In reality, consistency matters more than speed. A man who responds calmly, clearly, and without urgency feels far more grounded than a man who responds instantly out of fear of losing connection. This boundary also protects emotional balance. When your schedule is not flexible around someone else's moods, your emotional state stabilizes. You stop living in anticipation of responses. You stop checking your phone compulsively. That inner calm is visible even through text. Women respond strongly to men whose time feels structured. Structure signals leadership. Leadership creates safety. Safety builds respect. The key is consistency. If you are available one day and unreachable the next without reason, confusion replaces respect. But when your availability follows a stable rhythm, people adjust naturally. They learn when and how access to you exists. This boundary teaches an important lesson without words. It teaches that your presence is chosen, not automatic, and what is chosen is respected more than what is given freely. A man who controls his time does not chase attention. He allows attention to meet him where he stands. Number 2, the boundary of emotional labor. One of the most overlooked boundaries men fail to set is emotional labor, because many men are taught that being emotionally available at all times is proof of maturity and strength. In reality, emotional availability without limits turns a man into an emotional caretaker rather than a romantic equal, and caretakers are relied on, not respected. Emotional labor includes listening endlessly without reciprocity, absorbing emotional stress that is not yours to carry, and constantly regulating someone else's emotions at the expense of your own. When a man takes on this role unconsciously, he slowly shifts from partner to emotional support system. Attraction does not survive that shift. Women do not lose respect for men who care. They lose respect for men who abandon themselves emotionally to maintain connection. When you consistently put her emotional comfort above your own emotional stability, you teach her that your needs are secondary. That lesson never leads to respect. This boundary is not about being cold or dismissive. It is about refusing to overfunction emotionally. A man with this boundary listens, supports, and engages, but he does not fix, chase, or absorb emotions that belong to someone else. He allows others to process their feelings without making himself responsible for the outcome. Many men fear that stepping back emotionally will make them appear uncaring. In reality, emotional containment feels safer than emotional overextension. A man who can remain present without being consumed by emotional turbulence appears grounded. Grounded men are respected. When you stop carrying emotional weight that is not yours, something important happens. Conversations become lighter. Interactions feel balanced. You stop feeling drained after every exchange. That internal shift is felt externally. This boundary also protects your identity. When emotional labor is unlimited, a man begins to define himself by how useful he is emotionally. That identity is fragile. It depends on being needed rather than being chosen. Respect grows when you are chosen, not when you are relied upon out of emotional convenience. Setting this boundary does not require confrontation. It requires restraint. It means not immediately responding to emotional spirals, not rushing to reassure insecurity, and not sacrificing your own emotional clarity to stabilize someone else. Over time, people adjust to the level of emotional access you provide. Women who respect themselves respond positively to this boundary. They engage more consciously. They regulate their emotions more responsibly. Women who seek emotional outsourcing may resist it. That resistance is information, not failure. A man who protects his emotional energy sends a clear message. He values connection, but not at the cost of self-respect. That message changes how he is perceived. When emotional labor becomes balanced, respect replaces exhaustion, and attraction has space to grow again. Number 3, the boundary of disrespectful behavior. One of the most critical boundaries a man must establish is how he responds to disrespectful behavior, especially when that behavior is subtle, indirect, or disguised as humor. Disrespect does not always appear as open hostility. It often appears as dismissiveness, sarcasm, delayed responses used as leverage, or inconsistent treatment that erode his dignity over time. Many men tolerate early signs of disrespect because they fear conflict or loss. They tell themselves it is minor, temporary, or not worth addressing, but tolerance teaches patterns. When disrespect goes unrest, it becomes normalized, and once normalized, it escalates. This boundary is not about confrontation or arguments, it is about immediate recalibration. When disrespect occurs, the most powerful response is not emotional reaction, but behavioral adjustment, reduced access, reduced engagement, reduced emotional investment. These adjustments communicate consequences without drama. A man who argues about disrespect often loses leverage. Arguments shift focus to emotion rather than behavior. Calm disengagement keeps the focus where it belongs. When behavior changes, access changes. Women respond strongly to men who do not negotiate respect. When a man calmly removes himself from disrespectful dynamics, it signals clarity. Clarity creates safety and authority at the same time. Many men believe that calling out disrespect verbally is necessary. In some cases, clear communication is appropriate, but repeated explanations weaken the boundary. Respect should not need constant justification. This boundary also protects self-perception. Every time you tolerate disrespect, you train yourself to accept less. Over time, this erodes confidence. Confidence is not lost through rejection, it is lost through self-betrayal. When a man enforces this boundary consistently, patterns change. Either behavior improves or the dynamic dissolves. Both outcomes preserve dignity. Disrespect thrives in ambiguity. Clear boundaries eliminate ambiguity. When expectations are visible through action, not words, respect stabilizes. A woman who values you adjusts quickly. A woman who does not reveals herself through resistance. That clarity saves time and emotional energy. Respect cannot be begged for. It can only be required through alignment. A man who protects his dignity without emotional escalation becomes someone whose presence is taken seriously, and seriousness creates respect naturally. Number 4, the boundary of standards in effort and investment. One of the most important boundaries that directly influences how much a woman respects you is the boundary around effort and emotional investment. Respect does not grow when effort is one-sided. It grows when effort is mutual, visible, and balanced over time. When a man consistently gives more than he receives, he may appear generous, but psychologically he positions himself as lower value. Many men believe that being the one who invests more will secure affection. They initiate more, plan more, compromise more, and emotionally lean in harder, thinking this proves seriousness. In reality, excessive investment without reciprocity removes tension and eliminates the need for the other person to step forward. The boundary here is not about withholding effort, it is about matching effort. When interest is present, investment should flow naturally from both sides. When effort drops on her side and increases on yours, respect begins to erode quietly. A man with this boundary does not chase momentum, he responds to it. If communication slows, he does not compensate by over-initiating. If plans are uncertain, he does not push for reassurance. He allows effort to reveal alignment rather than forcing connection. This boundary exposes emotional truth quickly. A woman who values you adjusts her investment when she senses balance. A woman who prefers convenience withdraws. Both outcomes provide clarity. Many men fear that pulling back effort will be interpreted as disinterest. In reality, disproportionate effort creates pressure, while balanced effort creates space. Space allows attraction to breathe. This boundary also reinforces self-respect. When you stop over-investing, you stop seeking validation through effort. Your actions become intentional rather than compensatory. That internal shift changes how you are perceived. Effort is meaningful when it is chosen, not when it is given out of fear. A man who chooses when and how to invest communicates confidence. Confidence earns respect. Consistency matters here. If you oscillate between overinvestment and withdrawal, confusion replaces respect. But when your effort remains steady and responsive rather than reactive, people adapt naturally. A woman who senses that effort must be mutual to continue will either rise to the standard or remove herself. That is not loss. That is alignment. This boundary teaches a powerful lesson without words. It teaches that connection is a shared responsibility. And when responsibility is shared, respect grows. Number 5, the boundary of walking away without explanation. The final boundary that changes everything is the willingness to walk away without explaining yourself when your standards are repeatedly ignored. This boundary is not about punishment, ego, or emotional withdrawal. It is about alignment, and alignment is something no amount of explanation can replace. Most men feel compelled to explain why they are pulling back. They want to be understood, they want fairness, they want acknowledgement, but explanation often weakens boundaries instead of strengthening them. When you explain too much, you invite negotiation. And when boundaries become negotiable, respect begins to fade. A man who is willing to walk away calmly without speeches, threats, or emotional reactions communicates something powerful. He shows that his standards are not dependent on agreement. They are self-directed. This independence is felt instantly. The psychological weak spot here is expectation. When someone expects unlimited tolerance, the absence of explanation becomes unsettling. The mind searches for meaning. That search restores awareness of value. Walking away without explanation does not mean disappearing impulsively. It means recognizing patterns and responding structurally rather than emotionally. When disrespect, imbalance, or neglect become consistent, the most dignified response is distance, not debate. Many men fear this boundary because they believe silence equals weakness. In reality, silence backed by action is clarity. It says, I know what I accept, and this no longer aligns. That message does not need to be verbalized to be understood. This boundary also protects your emotional energy. Explaining repeatedly drains you. Walking away preserves you. Preservation is strength. Women respect men who do not overjustify themselves. Overjustification signals doubt. Certainty signals authority. A man who leaves calmly shows certainty. This is often the moment when respect either returns or the connection ends. Both outcomes are wins. Respect that returns is earned. Connections that end were misaligned. The goal is not to make someone regret losing you. The goal is to never abandon yourself to keep someone. When a man embodies this boundary, he stops fearing loss. Loss loses its power when self-respect is intact. This is the boundary that ties all others together. Time, emotional labor, respect, effort, and standards all rest on the willingness to walk away when alignment disappears. And once a man truly understands this, he no longer asks how to be respected. His behavior answers that question for him. Number 6, the boundary of inner approval over external validation. The most powerful boundary a man can ever set is not external, it is internal. It is the boundary between seeking approval from women and approving himself first. And this boundary determines how every other boundary is perceived. Most men do not realize how often their behavior is driven by the desire to be validated. They adjust tone, timing, effort, and even personality based on how they think a woman will react. This constant calibration quietly communicates insecurity even when the man appears confident on the surface. When a man needs external validation, boundaries feel threatening to him. He fears that saying no will cost him connection. He fears that walking away will mean rejection. He fears that standing firm will make him undesirable. These fears leak into behavior, and women sense them immediately. The boundary of inner approval changes everything because it removes fear from the equation. A man who approves of himself does not need constant confirmation. He does not over-explain. He does not seek reassurance. He does not need to be liked to remain grounded. This boundary is felt more than seen. It shows in posture, tone, pacing, and emotional restraint. It shows in how a man reacts when challenged, ignored, or tested. He does not rush to restore comfort. He remains aligned with himself. Women respond deeply to this boundary because it signals emotional independence. Emotional independence is not emotional distance. It is emotional ownership. A man who owns his emotional state cannot be controlled through attention or withdrawal. Many men believe validation comes from being chosen. In reality, being chosen feels powerful only when you already choose yourself. Without self-approval, external validation becomes addictive. With self-approval, validation becomes optional. This boundary also dissolves manipulation naturally. When approval is internal, emotional games lose their effect. Ignoring you does not provoke reaction. Attention does not inflate ego. Praise does not alter behavior. You remain consistent. Consistency rooted in self-approval is what creates authority. Authority is respected instinctively because it feels stable. Stability feels safe. Safety creates respect. A man who sets this boundary stops asking how to be respected. He stops monitoring reactions. He stops negotiating value. His presence becomes calm and decisive because it is no longer dependent on outcomes. This is the boundary that prevents future disrespect. When self-approval is intact, you naturally disengage from misalignment early. You do not tolerate situations that require you to shrink, explain, or chase. The strongest men are not those who are always admired. They are those who do not need admiration to remain whole. When a man draws the boundary of inner approval, every other boundary holds effortlessly. Time is protected. Emotional energy is preserved, effort is balanced, walking away becomes natural, and when inner approval replaces external validation, respect is no longer something you try to earn. It is something others feel when they are around you. Number 7, the boundary of non-negotiable self-respect. The final boundary that separates men who are respected from men who are merely tolerated is the boundary of non-negotiable self-respect. This boundary is not about what you say, demand, or explain. It is about what you refuse to compromise, even when doing so would feel easier in the short term. Most men have values, but very few have non-negotiables. A value can bend under pressure. A non-negotiable does not. When a man negotiates his self-respect to preserve attraction, he teaches others that his standards are flexible under emotional stress. Once that lesson is learned, respect erodes quickly and quietly. Self-respect becomes non-negotiable when a man decides that no relationship, attention, or validation is worth abandoning himself. This decision changes how he moves, speaks, and responds. He no longer tolerates mixed signals, chronic disrespect, emotional imbalance, or being kept in uncertainty. Not because he is angry, but because those dynamics no longer align with who he is. The psychological weak spot here is tolerance. When a woman senses that a man will tolerate behaviors that drain him emotionally, she subconsciously loses respect, even if she benefits from that tolerance. Humans do not respect what they can take from freely without consequence. Non-negotiable self-respect introduces finality into boundaries. It means that repeated violations are not discussed endlessly. They are answered with distance, not punishment, not drama. Distance rooted in clarity. Many men believe enforcing this boundary will make them appear rigid or unloving. In reality, clarity is far more attractive than emotional flexibility without direction. A man who knows where he stands allows others to know where they stand with him. This boundary also ends internal conflict. When self-respect is negotiable, a man is constantly torn between desire and dignity. When it is non-negotiable, decisions become simple. Alignment replaces anxiety. Calm replaces overthinking. A woman who respects herself responds positively to this boundary. She adjusts, engages more consciously, and respects the man's standards. A woman who thrives on emotional leverage disengages. Both outcomes protect the man's integrity. Non negotiable self respect also prevents future repetition of the same dynamics. When you walk away once with clarity, you do not need to repeat lessons. Your standards become known through action. This boundary is the final filter. It ensures that only relationships built on mutual respect, effort, and alignment survive in your life. Everything else falls away naturally. In short, respect does not appear because you ask for it, explain yourself, or prove your intentions. It appears when your behavior consistently reflects self-worth, clarity, and emotional discipline. The 7 boundaries you've learned are not techniques to control others. They are principles that protect you. When you protect your time, you communicate value. When you limit emotional labor, you preserve balance. When you address disrespect through action, you maintain dignity. When you match effort instead of overinvesting, you create polarity. When you are willing to walk away without explanation, you show alignment. When you approve of yourself internally, you remove fear. And when self-respect becomes non-negotiable, everything else falls into place. These boundaries work together. If one collapses, the others weaken. But when all 7 are held calmly and consistently, respect becomes unavoidable. Not because you demand it, but because your presence requires it. Most men struggle because they react emotionally to moments of uncertainty. They try to fix situations that require alignment, not explanation. But attraction and respect are not logical negotiations. They are emotional responses to stability. A man who lives by boundaries does not chase attention. He does not fear silence. He does not negotiate value. He allows others to meet him where he stands or fall away naturally. This is the shift that changes everything. You stop asking how to be respected and start asking who belongs in your life. That question filters dynamics faster than any conversation ever could. The strongest men are not the most aggressive or dominant. They are the most grounded. Their calm is not passive, it is controlled, and control over self always comes before influence over others. When you apply these boundaries, some people will resist. That resistance is clarity. It shows you who benefited from your lack of standards. Let them go. Alignment always costs something. What it gives back is peace. Respect from women does not come from performance. It comes from presence, from emotional discipline, from self-respect that does not bend under pressure. And once you live this way, respect stops being something you seek. It becomes something people feel when they are around you. That is the difference between being tolerated and being respected. Remember, knowledge means nothing without action. If you're ready to rise above emotion and lead with purpose, join the community today at the link below.